Are chief data officers failing, and are they taking advantage of the Gen AI way? Well, today in this CarCast, I'm going to bring an expert who's been studying this since 2012. You're not going to want to miss today's episode, and you're going to want to stay until the end. But in the meantime, if there's one piece of research you have time to check out as your week starts, it would have to be Boston Consulting Group's research that came out on Friday about their latest finding on Gen AI adoption. My friend Lucas and his team have come up with really solid stats on how people can create and destroy value when it comes to Gen AI. You have to take a look at this report just to give you a taste of what they found in their experiment. The first one, and the obvious one that everybody's talked about, is clearly Gen AI is a powerful leveler of performance. When you're using Gen AI for creative product innovation, their experiment found that 90% of participants have improved their performance. That's really good news. Even better, those that have used Gen AI are converging the level of performance to 40% higher than those who are working without. So clearly there's a huge advantage here. But the flip side of that is that when participants use the technology for problem solving, so not in a creative innovation context, they perform 23% worse than those who used it without Gen AI. And even participants that actually were warned about the possibilities of wrong answers from the tool actually did not challenge the output. So bottom line here is that it seems that people might mistrust the technology in areas where it can contribute massively. And they might also trust it a little too much in areas where the technology actually isn't competent or helpful to help them. So fascinating report. It's a must read as you start your week, in my opinion. There are many, many more resources you're going to find in my blog and my LinkedIn feed if you browse through it, such as McKinsey's Future of Gen AI in 15 charts, my interview on the CXO Talk on Friday on AI in the enterprise. I'm going to let you go check that out because today I want to focus on this top question we started this with. Are CDOs failing? Are they not taking advantage of Gen AI? And to help us get a deeper understanding on what's going on with the chief data officers globally, I've asked the world authority in this field to join me, and that's my friend Randy Bean. So Randy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to see you, Bruno, as always.
Anyone that does anything in the chief data officer field knows your work. You're the author of this book. I think you have it as well. There you go. It's a great book. Everybody should check this out. You've been running CDO networks for over 12 years. You presented recently at the MIT conference, the symposium they have on data there. You published a piece on Forbes. You published on Harvard Business Review. And the piece on Forbes focuses on how CDOs are performing and how Gen AI can play in their future. Before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to these days?
Yeah, I've spent 40 years, believe it or not, in the field. I started off with a major bank. I was actually trained as a COBOL and assembler programmer, but I was much more interested in the data than the programming. And 20 years ago, I launched the firm New Vantage Partners, and we were advising Fortune 1000 companies on how to leverage data and analytics in their business. But along the way, particularly when big data came into vogue, I started to get asked to write. So I wrote a monthly column on big data for the Wall Street Journal for 2 years. I've been writing ever since then with Forbes, case studies about what organizations are doing. Write regularly for Harvard Business Review, as well as Forbes, as mentioned, and MIT Sloan Management Review. And it should be noted, the piece that I wrote last week in Forbes talks about it's been 15 years since the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, which triggered the financial collapse. And that triggered the first appointments of enterprise chief data officers within major banks. And one of the things that had happened was the first enterprise chief data officer for a major bank, in this case, Citigroup, was one of the partners in my firm. So from the very get-go, had visibility into the establishment of this role, have over the years counseled organizations heavily on how they develop this role within the organization. For 9 years now, have been organizing the CDO keynote panel, which have brought together 50 chief data officers for the MIT CDO IQ event. And since 2012, have been doing a survey of leading Fortune 1000 companies. 86% of the respondents hold the title of chief data officers. Others are CEOs or other C-level executives. And in December of 2021, I sold my company to Paris-based global consultancy Wavestone, where I continue an affiliation as their innovation fellow for data strategy.
So that's a great summary, and you're at the origin of a lot of the insights we have on the evolution of the chief data officer role. So we'll get to your Forbes piece. Before we get there, I want to talk about the Harvard Business Review one, where, I mean, you had a pretty controversial title, Why Chief Data and AI Officers Are Set Up to Fail. So break down for us here, what are the gotchas here for these CDOs? What's happening?
Well, first of all, it's not that old of a role, so it's still a pretty new role. You know, when you consider large companies, particularly legacy companies, 15 years is not that old. And but it's also been a very tenuous role. A couple of years ago, I wrote a piece in Harvard Business Review, co-authored with Tom Davenport, where we said the average tenure of a chief data officer was only 2 years. And if anything, for some organizations, that's gotten shorter. I was speaking with a Fortune 1000 CDO just before our conversation now. And what I was telling this person was that I've never seen as high of a turnover in the role as I have in 2023. And a lot of that is driven by financial pressures. In other words, organizations, because of uncertainty in the market, have started to say, what is the value that we're getting from all the money that we've invested in data and analytics initiatives? And can we quantify that? And if we have a limited amount of money to spend, where are we going to spend it? And as a consequence of that, a lot of chief data officers have been called on the carpet, and they've read the writing on the wall, and either they've left their role or they've seen that the organization wasn't going to stay committed. So literally at the beginning of the year, I was saying, I know like 12 chief data officers that have left their roles with Fortune 1000 company. Then it was like 20, 25. And these days, I've said most of the chief data officers that I knew that were in their roles at the beginning of this year are no longer in those roles.
That's really quite amazing. I mean, the amount of impatience that's driving kind of the disconnect between the chief data officers and the rest of the organization. Now, in your piece in Forbes, you talk about this belief that the emergence of Gen AI will unleash a disruption that's comparable to what happened with the internet and is supposed to accelerate transformation. Is that an opportunity for chief data officers? Is that a distractor? How is that going to play now if you think 5 years out?
It's both a tremendous opportunity as well as a distractor, in the sense that many organizations are starting to rethink the chief data officer role. As you probably know, the chief data officer role really started with many organizations as a defensive type of position, regulatory risk management. And then over time, it evolved into a more offensive role, revenue generation, customer satisfaction, customer acquisition, things of that kind. So there's been a couple, and then it expanded into the chief data and analytics officer role, the CDAO. Now we have organizations that are starting to appoint people that are CDAIO, so Chief Data Analytics, Artificial Intelligence Officer, et cetera. So many organizations are now starting to rethink, wait a minute, this is getting a little too complex. What is it that we need in the role? Is it somebody that's managing us from a risk and regulatory compliance? Is it somebody that's looking forward and thinking, where are the opportunities to leverage generative AI in our business? Where does that fit in within the organization? So many organizations are rethinking this. And I can tell you that at the MIT CDO IQ event that I had during the summer, I had 5 sitting chief data officers representing organizations including Visa, Universal Music, Sanofi, Levi's, among others. And all of them were now reporting to a line of business head. And so there's been a real shift away from being part of the technology organization to being a business and a business functional role.
So you said this new title is CDAIO. We're going to run out of vowels. What is the what's the title again?
CDAIO, where the A stands for both analytics and artificial, and then the I's for intelligence. So it's getting kind of nutty and absurd. And so, with the financial pressures as well, a lot of organizations are saying, this is really the time to take a step back, to think about what we really need, to think about generative AI and where that's going to fit into the organization in the future, and where we want to put those responsibilities. And is it within one person, within multiple people? Does it sit on the business side? So they're really reevaluating and reassessing what this role should be in their organization, because it's changed over time.
So that's not very reassuring. I mean, if I remember correctly, in this year's survey that you issued, 60% of chief data officers that felt their role was misunderstood. Do you think it's going to get worse?
Yeah, the data was that only roughly 35% felt that the role was well established and successful in their organization, and 40% of the organization said the role wasn't really understood. But I think there's good news. When we first started the survey in 2012, I believe it was roughly 12% of organizations had a CDAO or something equivalent to that. And this year it was roughly 86%. And so in the Forbes article, I make the comment, I say, while the progress of data and AI adoption has been slow, the need for data and AI leadership is greater than ever. So the need's not going to go away. The demand's only going to increase. It's really more about, what is the structure of the role? What is the responsibilities? What are the things that will make the organization successful? And the other thing that's taken place, and, I know that there's been many, many people that I am friends with that are very successful chief data officers, but at the same time, there's been people that have been subject matter experts that have been elevated into the role, aren't used to operating in the C-suite, aren't used to managing a long-term transformation. And also many of those individuals have tended to fall back on the jargon. They speak about data meshes, data fabrics, MDM, data literacy, things of that kind. And the business organizations say, speak business terms to us, please. Speak about how data and AI can contribute to revenue growth, to customer satisfaction, those type of activities. So they get frustrated. Sometimes they feel that the people in these roles think that they're smarter than they are, and they say, hey, we're running the company. They work for us fundamentally. So I think, the CDAO I was speaking with a little bit earlier, they said, they're taking a quiet approach. And so that's one of the things that's making them successful within their organization. They're being sensitive to the readiness organization and how prepared an organization is to transform.
Now, while that's happening, it seems, at least if you read your Forbes article, that the data and AI transformation efforts really haven't progressed as fast as they should have, particularly for leading companies. So what's happening here? What are you seeing?
Well, I read something recently in The Economist that made perfect sense, and I touch upon that in the article. And what it said was that 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have existed more than 50 years, and the average age of the major banks in the Fortune 500 was, I believe, over 130 years. So the point is that 90% of the Fortune 500 is really legacy companies. The same article stated that actually 30% of the total R&D investment in the Fortune 500 is within 5 companies: Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft. So the point is that legacy companies, if you're American Express, if you're another organization, you don't need to reinvent yourself to be another Amazon. All you really need to do is compete with the other 90% of the organizations that are in the same boat as you. So as a result of that, these organizations need to figure out how to transform, but they're doing it at a much more gradual pace. And they're not really competing with the 10%, they're competing with the 90%.
Now, if you take those insights with the transforming role of the chief data officer, the ones that are listening to us today, what do you think they should do? Where do they go from here?
One of the things that I wrote about in the Forbes article is that many of the chief data officers that I know that have left their positions since the beginning of the year are not going back into CDO roles. They're either going into advisory roles or board type of activities, board advisors, rather than going into the CDO role again. For many of them, it's a case of been there, done that, not going to do that again. So it's something that they've gone through. And one of the things I've seen this year is a next generation of people going into the chief data officer roles, particularly as organizations continue to refine what the role means, as well as people just purely on the business side of the organization. So it continues to be a role that's a work in progress. The demand for data and AI leadership will only grow, but the role will continue to transform. And that's not bad news. That's really good news because organizations need to evolve. The name of my book is Fail Fast, Learn Faster. So it's not about setting off on a path and sticking to that. It's that you learn along the way, and you adapt and you continue to adjust. And organizations are learning from their experience having chief data officers. Some of the major banks are on their 7th iteration of people in the role. So it's not a bad thing. They're learning from experience.
So fail fast, learn faster. That's the title of the book. Everybody should check it out. If they want to stay in touch with you, where should they follow you? On LinkedIn, Forbes? What are the best ways to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm under Randy Bean MVP. And also my website for my articles, my books, my research is randybeandata.com.
And it's fair to assume you'll be running that CDO survey again this year?
Yes, we'll continue to run the survey. We'll continue to host about 2 chief data officer events per month for a range of organizations. And we'll continue to advise Fortune 1000 companies on how to successfully transform and leverage data and AI, and what the CDO, CDAO, and CDAIO role can really look like for those organizations.
Outstanding. Well, Randy, thank you so much for giving us the time. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you, hopefully soon in person, and we'll see you very soon.